let's talk about Roman mythology, Roman mythos, and the Aeneid, which is the mythos of Aeneas's piety, duteousness, following his mission, his duty, turning aside from his desire, his personal interests. Very non-modern in many ways, although I guess we can see. Oh, on a conference. Let me get that off. Um, and so let's just jump in. We're going to do books 2, 3, and 4, and just some snippets here and there. And so yeah, let's do this. And when Aeneas is telling his story, he's weaving his tale. He's getting the people of Carthage, especially Dido, the queen, excited about this story, inspired, moved, crying by this story, this ritualized story, sitting around in their, well, wherever they are in Carthage, I suppose in her palace, or at least some kind of building that they've built. And Aeneas is telling about all these different monsters he's got to fight, and these storms that he's got to weather, and all kinds of difficulties that he's overcoming, which makes him seem really cool and exciting and like the most interesting guy around, so that Dido cannot help but fall in love with him. By the way, there's also gods and goddesses kind of making that more easy for her to fall in love with him, and him to fall in love with her, because he's also desiring her. And he's telling this story of fighting these monsters, the harpies, these really scary looking and disgusting things, although also an object of desire potentially, where here's Aeneas describing it, but all of a sudden, watch. With a ghastly swoop, from the hills the harpies swarm us, ruffling, clattering wing beats, ripping our food to bits, polluting it all with their foul, corrupting claws. There are obscene shrieks bursting from the stench. Again, in a deep recess under rocky cliffs, screened around by trees in trembling shade, we deck our tables out, relight the altar fire, but again, from some new height, some hidden nest, the rout comes screaming at their quarry, flapping round us, slashing with claw feet, hookbeaks fouling our meat. To arms, I command the men, wage all-out war against this brutal crew. And so they fight against the harpies, and they drive them off courageously. He makes much of how disgusting they are. They're fouling the food. They're disgusting. The emotion of disgust is an important one for psychology, and here Aeneas is laying into it heavily. And then we see the one named harpy, Celaeno, or Cheleno, or Celaeno, all but one, perched on a beetling crag. Celaeno, prophet of doom, her shrieks erupted from her breast. So, war as well now, gearing for battle are you? You, the sons of Laomedon, as if to atone for the butchery of our cattle, our young bulls. You'd force the innocent harpies from their father's kingdom? Take what I say to heart and stamp it into your minds. This prophecy the Almighty Father made to Phoebus, and Phoebus made to me, the greatest of the Furies, and I reveal to you. Italy is the land you seek. You call on the winds to sweep you there by sea. To Italy you will go, permitted to enter port, but never granted a city girded round by ramparts, not before some terrible hunger and your attack on us. Outrageous slaughter drive you to gnaw your platters with your teeth. So she is mad at them and angry at them for butchering her cattle and the bulls and so forth. And now she's prophesying, because she's heard from Phoebus. Phoebus is the name for Apollo, the god Apollo, the Lord, the god of light and reason, and reveals that they're going to Italy. And it's like, okay, yeah, you are going to Italy, but it's going to be tough there. You're going to have to fight this city girded round by ramparts. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to fight. You're going to have to, many of you are going to have to die. She's prophesying to them. And so this is their story. Later on in this part, let's see if I can find it. Aeneas and his men, after they get rid of the harpies, they see Andromache. Who's Andromache, you might ask? Andromache is the widowed wife of Hector. Hector is another great Trojan like Aeneas. And so Andromache is his widow. So she escaped Troy like Aeneas did. And here he is running into her and Helenus also. Here, an incredible story meets our ears that Helenus, Priam's son, holds sway over these Greek towns, that he had won the throne, and wife of Pyrrhus, son of Achilles. Andromache was wed once more to a man of Trojan stock. Astonishing. My heart burned with longing, irresistible longing to see my old friend and learn about this remarkable twist of fate. So good. So he runs into these former Trojans who have built a new life, and they're intermarrying with the Greeks now. And Pyrrhus, the son of Achilles, Helenus marries her, and Andromache marries once more a man of Trojan stock. So one of the other Trojans who's survived. And so we see other members of the Trojan group who have escaped. So this is perhaps a kind of a sign of hope for Aeneas. And so then they run into the Scylla. Let's see if I can find this scene here. Scylla and Charybdis, which is this whirlpool. And there's these two things that they're kind of stuck between in the whirlpool. Is very dangerous. They're in their ships, and the goddess Juno is setting up these traps, trying to stop them because she doesn't want them to go found Rome. And so he says, but now Scylla to starboard blocks your way, with never sated Charybdis off to port 3 times a day. Into the plunging whirlpool of her abyss, she gulps down floods of sea, then heaves them back in the air, pelting the stars with spray. Scylla lurks in her blind cave, thrusting out her mouths and hauling ships on her rocks. She's human at first glance, down to the waist, a girl with lovely breasts, but a monster of the deep below, her body writhing horror, her belly spawns wolves, flailing with dolphins' tails. Better to waste time skirting Sicily than in a long arc rounding Cape Pachynus that once set eyes on gruesome Scylla deep in her cave, her rocks booming with all her sea ground hounds. And so one of the things, and I'm going to share a whiteboard screen here if I can, that we see here is a kind of thing that we can apply a feminist critique to in the following form. Because what do we see in these monsters? A lot of them are feminine. The Furies are female monsters, these kind of flying female bird-like, half bird, half female woman monsters. And we have Scylla and Charybdis, which also are gendered female. Well, they're women. They look like women, and so they have the kind of alluring top of a woman, but then below, kind of like they're like a monster. And so there's even a kind of symbolic placing of the below part, which is the sexual part, that like female sexuality is this danger to the men, and that they have to defeat these by violence or by fleeing. And then we're going to get to Dido in a little bit. So let me, can I save this thing? All right, let's stop that share and let's go back to the story. And let's go to Dido. And actually, let me say this real quick. Actually, getting back to the whiteboard, I think, is it still saved there? Yes. Let's do a new little text here. passionate desire, especially female passionate desire, is something that is problematic in this text. And there's two different, well, there's more than two different ways, but there's two main ways to take this, which one is to say that this is anti-woman, that this is sexist, that it's chauvinistic, that it's showing that women who have strong desires are dangerous, they're violent, they can't be trusted, they lead to death, and we saw that with the monsters that we were talking about earlier. But the other reading is a kind of, well, let's just call it a feminist reading, which is what? It's affirming female desire, because we look at Dido and we look at other strong female characters like Camilla later on, and we like them. Well, I like them. We admire this. And I think in this reading, the idea is that even though verbally or textually the text is critiquing Dido and saying that she's you know, a block to Aeneas's work, a dangerous distraction from his important masculine work, we admire her. We see how loving, how passionate she is, how self-giving, how much she has suffered. She lost her first husband to murder. Now she's been kind of, clearly traumatized by all that, but now finally she's finding a new potential love in Aeneas, and he's a good guy. I mean, and they have a lot in common. They both have suffered the loss of their spouse. They both are founding a new country. They both have kind of heroism, and they're both, well, certainly Aeneas is what? He is a tale teller. He is the storyteller. He is the mythopoeia. He's weaving the myth. And this is inspiring. This is showing her something of his deep inner self and attaching her to that deep inner self. So anyway, so let's go and look at this tragic story of Dido, and just walk through a little bit at a time here. And so I need to find my next text. Oops. Get rid of this for a second. The Queen. So here's book 4 in this text, titled "The Tragic Queen of Carthage," and it says, but the queen too long she has suffered the pain of love, hour by hour nursing the wound with her life blood, consumed by the fire buried in her heart, the man's courage, the sheer pride of his line, they all come pressing home to her over and over, his looks, his words, they pierce her heart and cling, no peace, no rest for her body, love will give her none. And this is in this wonderful verse form that I'm trying to recreate for you. But she's fallen totally in love with this guy, and it keeps growing, and she sees his courage, his pride, and it's over and over, his looks, his words piercing her heart, and she's got no rest. And it's like, yeah, this is a love story. And so let's look a little further down here and see how this is expressed here. I confess it, yes. This is Dido saying, I confess it, yes, Anna, yes. Ever since my Sichaeus, her husband, my poor husband met his fate, being murdered, and my own brother shed his blood and stained our household gods, this is the only man who's roused me deeply, swayed my wavering heart, the signs of the old flame, I know them well. I pray that the earth gape deep enough to take me down, or the Almighty Father blast me with one bolt to the shades, the pale glimmering shades in hell, the pit of night. Before I dishonor you, my conscience, break your laws. He's carried my love away. The man who wed me first, may he hold it tight, safeguard it in his grave. She broke off, her voice choking with tears that brimmed and wet her breast. And so this affirming Dido's passion. And I kind of want to say, yes, how could you not like this? I mean, obviously, some people see this, oh, this is like shows her irrationality and she's dangerous. But I don't think that's a strong reading. I think a stronger reading of this is the feminist reading we were talking about, where we see a woman who's full of passion and thought and pain, and she's overcoming that, and she's rousing herself, and she's saying like, okay, the man who wed me first, okay, he's dead, okay, I'm moving on, I've got to build my life. And then she's crying. Imagine an actress saying this. We would love this. I mean, imagine, I don't know which actress, Anya Joy Taylor, or who played Barbie, what was her name, uh Margot Robbie. I mean, imagine like this woman saying these words and breaking down in tears. We would love that. This is a very, I'm reading this is a very pro woman story, um, even though it's going against Aeneas's mission. So let's go to the next scene. Too late, where we see this. The goddesses, Juno and Venus, are getting together and saying, hey, let's make these two people fall in love. Make is too strong word. What I think, at least my reading of the way the gods pull strings on humans, isn't that they force them, but certainly they influence them. And here we see the influence of the goddesses making it easy for Dido and Aeneas to fall in love by having the storm come and having there be a cave right there, where they end up going into the cave because it's raining. And think about like all the love scenes where like it starts to rain and they got to share the umbrella, or they've got to go underneath this thing and hang out together. Anyway, this is one of the first times that this happens in fiction. And it's too late. The skies have begun to rumble, peals of thunder first, and the storm breaking next, a cloudburst pelting hail, and the troops of hunters scatter up and down the plain. Tyrian comrades, bands of Dardans, Venus's grandson Iulus panicking, running for cover, quick, and down the mountain, gullies erupt in torrents. So all the other guys leave conveniently, so that Dido and Aeneas are alone, and they're in this cave. Dido and Troy's commander make their way to the same cave for shelter now. Primordial earth and Juno, queen of marriage, give the signal, and the lightning torches flare, and the high sky bears witness to the wedding. Notice it's called a wedding. Nymphs on the mountaintops wail out the wedding hymn. This was the first day of her death, the first of grief, the cause of it all. There's a foreshadowing. And from now on, Dido cares no more for appearances, nor for her reputation either. She no longer thinks to keep the affair a secret. No, she calls it a marriage, using the word to cloak her sense of guilt. And so she's like, we're having sex because we're married. And it is a marriage, at least in this sense, like Juno, the goddess of marriage, and these nymphs are singing the hymn of wedding. And so this, in this sense, is a marriage. So how can you fault Dido? I mean, is it really a sense of guilt? And the text says that, but again, I think I would focus on the powerful emotional strength of Dido. And like, isn't that so romantic? Like it rains and they get stuck together. It's like so perfect. So let's go to this scene here where Dido finds out that Aeneas is leaving, and he has heard from Mercury and the other gods, like, hey, your duty isn't to stay here with in Carthage with Dido, and I know she's really sexy and loves you, but you've got to leave her and go found Rome, remember? And so he's getting ready to leave, and naturally, uh, uh by the way, he loves her, like, and she knows that. So, like, she's definitely um got reason to be upset now. um she assails Aeneas. At last, she assails Aeneas before he said a word. So, you traitor, you really believed you'd keep this a secret, this great outrage, steal away in silence from my shores? Can nothing hold you back? Not our love? Not the pledge once sealed with our right hands? Like, when we were, having sex in that cave and we kind of pledged our plight to each other? Not even the thought of Dido doomed to a cruel death? Like, I'm going to die if you leave. Why labor to rig your fleet when the winter's raw, to risk the deep when the north wind's closing in? You cruel, heartless, even if you were not pursuing alien fields and unknown homes, even if ancient Troy were standing still, who'd sail for Troy across such heaving seas? You're running away from me? Oh, I pray you, by these tears, by the faith in your right hand, what else have I left myself in all my pain? Isn't this awesome? Isn't this so sad? Isn't this so moving? By our wedding vows, the marriage we began. If I deserve some decency from you now, if anything mine has ever won your heart, pity a great house about to fall, I pray you, if prayers have any place. Reject this scheme of yours. And so she goes on, and she's upbraiding him. And and again, I say, don't we like her? Don't we have pity on her? Don't we get moved by these statements? And then we hear Aeneas's kind of lame response. And here's what he says. The queen stopped, but he, warned by Jupiter now, his gaze held steady, fought to master the torment of his heart, because he's feeling like, yeah, you're right, maybe I should stay. At last he ventured a few words. You have done me so many kindnesses, and you could count them all. I shall never deny what you deserve, my queen. Never regret my memories of Dido, not while I can recall myself and draw the breath of life. We had so many great times, Dido. Oh, come on. I'm not going to forget those, he says. I'll state my case in a few words. I never dreamed I'd keep my flight a secret. Don't imagine that. Nor did I once extend a bridegroom's torch to enter into marriage pact with you. Wait a minute. What does he say? I did not extend a bridegroom's torch or enter into a marriage pact with you. Has he misled her? She was calling it a marriage. And he never said, hey, wait a minute, this is not a marriage. He went along with it, didn't he? He was like, yeah, this is marriage. Let's go to bed. I mean, he was like all into it back then. And he did not. And I guess, yeah, a marriage is a two-way street. And he didn't, I guess, literally, technically marry her, but by going along with it and spending, a lot of time with her, wasn't he marrying her? Let's see what else he says. If the fates had left me free to live my life, to arrange my own affairs of my own free will, Troy is the city, first of all, that I'd safeguard. So it's like, okay, my first choice wouldn't be you. It would be back in Troy. Okay, that's a little bit of a mean thing to say, but okay, I get it. That I'd safeguard Troy and all that's left of my people whom I cherish. The grand palace of Priam would stand once more with my own hands. I would fortify a second Troy to house my Trojans in defeat, but not now. Granian Apollo's oracle, says that I must seize on Italy's noble land. His Lycian lots say, Italy, there lies my love, there lies my homeland now. If you, a Phoenician, fix your eyes on Carthage, a Libyan stronghold, tell me, why do you grudge the Trojans their new homes on Italian soil? And so forth. And okay, I mean, like, if he's 100% sure that this involves him having to go to Italy, but can't they like get married and like join Italy and Carthage into one country? Like that's what they, kings and queens do. Anyway, he's not seeing it. He's not doing it. He's leaving, and he's putting her down. And I guess let's pause for a second and spell this out on the whiteboard. And I'm not good at these stupid whiteboards. How do I get a new whiteboard? Let's see. Where's the controls? I go new whiteboard. Okay, good. New whiteboard. Good. Excellent. So in this new whiteboard, where's the controls again? Can I type something? Testing. Okay, let's just go to this one. So oh, come on. Let's try this again. Why isn't the whiteboard giving me the controls? Hold on a second here. Here they are, text. Can I go to the next page? Yeah. So human desire. What is my true self? Is it what I desire? Or is it myself defined by a mission external to me, to my desire and thought? And the modern sense tends to be that my true self is what I desire, isn't it? And yet for the ancient Romans, it's not. And it's an interesting thought, because who's smarter here? And obviously, like, there's different cultures and there's different approaches, but is it that Aeneas, is he repressing his desires using a Freudian term? That's what Freud would say, isn't it? I think that this is going to lead to what? To psychological problems. That's how psychological problems start, when you're repressing your desires unhealthily. But notice a different reading on this, that's non-Freudian, because which desires? And how long do those desires last? Because humans get confused about their desires. Think about all the divorces, people who love each other, desire each other, especially think about all the celebrity divorces, Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. They like loved each other, and then they end up hating each other's guts. And they're like, how could I ever have desired this guy or this girl? And so our desires can get confused. And is it, or maybe desires don't last that long? Is that the case? And if that's the case, maybe I should think about external missions and external purposes and teloses, goals, as something that is important. Because there's like desire for ice cream. Right now I could use some ice cream, but then what about my desire for like deeper things, deeper desires, like an intimate partner for life? Most people want that, and or at least for a long time, not for like a couple of days or like a couple of months, but for a long time. And how do you get that? You don't get that by following your desires wherever you want. You get that by controlling your desires, by limiting your desires, by guiding your desires, by cultivating your desires. So anyway, this is just a kind of quick thought on human desires, the modern self, which tends towards this expressive individualism, like what's inside of me, I've got to express that, as opposed to thinking about more like the whole universe and like how does myself fit with the patterns in the universe, with the missions I see outside of me, with the ideals of justice, love, beauty that are outside of me, which connect with something inside of me, but ultimately they're external to me. So anyway, let's look at poor Dido's end here. And so she is seeing that the man she loves isn't loving her back, and she is getting ready to kill herself, suicide. And she's talking to her beloved Anna and her friends and her other ladies in waiting. And she says, well, where should we start? With her spells, she vows to release the hearts of those she likes, to inflict raw pain on others, to stop the rivers in midstream, reverse the stars in their courses, raise the souls of the dead at night, and make their earth shudder and rumble underfoot, you'll see, and send the ash trees marching down the mountains. I swear by the gods, dear Anna, by your sweet life, I arm myself with magic arts against my will. Now go, build me a pyre in secret, deep inside your courtyard, under the open sky, pilot high with his arms. He left them hanging within our bridal chamber. So like, hey, I had this bridal chamber. We were like living together, and he left his weapons there, and put those on the fire, on the place where we were gonna have the fire. The traitor, so devoted then, and all his clothes, and crowning it all, the bridal bed that brought my doom. Put the bed on there, which is this bizarre sexual image of suicide. Like, I'll die on my own bed. I must obliterate every trace of the man, the curse, and the priestess shows the way. She says no more. And now as queen falls silent, pallor sweeps her face, and so forth. And so she's getting ready to kill herself. And it's a very long drawn out scene. Again, I think this is pro Dido. I think the fact that this is so long and moving, we're just like so moved by Dido here. And here, let's see the actual death. And it says, but Dido, trembling, desperate now with the monstrous thing afoot, her bloodshot eyes rolling, quivering cheeks blotched and pale with imminent death, goes bursting through the doors to the inner courtyard, clambers in frenzy up the soaring pyre, and unsheaths a sword, a Trojan sword, Aeneas' sword, she once sought as a gift, but not for such an end. And next catching sight of the Trojans' clothes in the bed they knew by heart, delaying a moment for tears for memory's sake, the queen laid down and spoke her final words. Oh, dear relics, dear as long as fate and the gods allowed, receive my spirit and set me free of pain. I have lived a life. I've journeyed through the course that fortune charted for me, and now I pass to the world below, my ghost in all its glory. I have founded a noble city, seen my ramparts rise. I have avenged my husband, punished my blood brother, our mortal foe. Happy, all too happy I would have been, if only the Trojan keels had never grazed our coast. She presses her face in the bed and cries out, I shall die unavenged, but I will die, I will. So I rejoice to make my way among the shades, and may that heartless Dardan, far at sea, drink down deep the sight of our fires here, and bear with him this omen of our death. And so forth. All at once, in the midst of her last words, her woman see her doubled over the sword, the blood foaming over the blade, her hands splattered red. A scream goes stabbing up to the high roofs. Rumor raves like a maenad through the shocked city, sobs and grief and the wails of women ringing out through homes, and the heavens echo back their keening din for all the world, as if enemies stormed the walls, and all of Carthage or old Troy Tyre would toppling down in flames in their fury, wave on mounting wave, were billowing over the roofs of men and gods. It's so dramatic. It's so sad and beautiful, and it's also predicting there's going to be wars between Carthage and Rome, and there's going to be the Punic Wars, and so this is set 750 years before the time of Caesar Augustus and Julius Caesar. But in the middle of that time period, in the 200s, I think, 200s BCE, the Romans are going to have a series of wars with the Carthaginians, and eventually they're going to completely destroy Carthage. And so this is kind of predicting that overthrow of Carthage. The famous line from one of the Romans, because they had all these wars, like, enough of these Carthaginians. And this one totally patriotic Roman says, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed, was his line. And so they did that. The Romans, they were pretty brutal. And they did that. So this is the story of Aeneas and Dido, the subject of many beautiful poems and plays and works of music, because it's so beautiful and it's so tragic. It's not like Romeo and Juliet exactly, because both Romeo and Juliet die, but it has that kind of flavor, and it's beautiful and it's moving. And so I think I would kind of tend toward the feminist reading of this story, other women's stories in the Aeneid. But again, I would ask us to think about desire, and what do I desire, and how do I know what I desire, and how do I know what I really desire? Because sometimes I desire something that is going to ruin, like, this is a silly example, but like, humans like candy, and I could eat I went and got some Milano cookies the other day. I could eat like a whole bunch of those, but then I feel sick at the end. I know that I'm gonna have to work out more later. Like, is that really what I want? So obviously, like, that's just a simple example, but desire isn't just like what I want. It really, you need to reflect a lot on the whole course of your whole life and your death, because in a way, you don't know what you want until you have a longer term. And so, and in fact, really, it's not in, think about, what do you want your eulogist to say at your funeral? What were the things that you did and that you loved and that you spent your time doing? And those tend to be the things that you most deeply want and most deeply desire: to be a loving person, to be a patient friend and spouse, and not necessarily someone who's like really good at making money. Like, who cares about that? I mean, it's an important thing to want, obviously, but that's not that deep of a desire. Like, these other things are deeper. So with that thought, I leave you.